What happened to point guard you, and how can Arizona get back to those days?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. This show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. Check it out. You will thank me later on this. All right, now we got a lot to get to this show. We are going to talk all Arizona basketball. We are going to talk point guard U, what's happened, and where Arizona can get back to that. Now, a couple things we got to keep in mind about point guard U is that first and foremost, this is a school that was built on point guard play. And listen, since Lute Olson left, Arizona's obviously had a lot of success. Has not been able to get back to a Final Four, but overall has been, you got, 5-6 Elite Eights in there with about a margin of loss in those Elite Eights of about, half a point. I mean, so a lot of top 10 finishes. So, when people throw out the, you haven't been to a Final Four in so long, yes, that's true, but it's a little bit disingenuous. But be that as it may, Arizona hasn't been to a Final Four. So let's talk a little bit about just kind of, what's been the deal. Historically, though, this program, though, was, and I was very fortunate enough to be grow up during this time, was built kind of on point guards. Now, listen, with Steve Kerr and Sean Elliott, Eddie Smith, Pete Williams, they obviously were the ones that put Arizona on the map. Pete Williams, Eddie Smith, guys that, they really were kind of that rock that started the Arizona football program. Then after that, you had Sean Elliott and Steve Kerr, and Sean Elliott obviously sent the entire thing into orbit. You got the best player in college basketball, probably the best player in the Pac-12 from the past, post UCLA dominance. I mean, National Player of the Year, conference's all-time leading scorer, 2-time first-team All-American, Final Four, et cetera, you name it. And then you had Steve Kerr there as well. But what really kind of sent Arizona into that next level, though, was the point guard play, as it became known as point guard U. And the first one that I think really kind of made Arizona sexy was Damon Stoudemire. Listen, Steve Kerr obviously did a great job here, but no kid, I think, was really growing up wanting to be Steve Kerr on the playground. No kid really, Steve Kerr didn't have that kind of, I guess, gravitas for lack of a better term, but he was obviously a centerpiece of what Arizona wanted to do. But Damon Stoudemire was the first one at that point guard spot that came in with sizzle, that came in with a just kind of a flair about him that not a lot of people people here hadn't really seen before. And honestly, it was just different. This was kind of in that West Coast Allen Iverson. Type vein where came in. He was the first dude that had a bunch of tats, was pulling up from, the cactus, was breaking people down off the dribble, looking silly, super fast, formed the best backcourt in the country along with Khalid Reeves. I mean, those two were absolutely fantastic. And, you had his jersey and clockers. I mean, he was just kind of, Damon was just nationally kind of the dude. I mean, he was the dude that just made everything go, made everybody look silly. And he has a Final Four on his resume. To me, it's still baffling that his jersey is not retired. To this day, I will not understand how that jersey is not hanging over McHale. That is something for another show. Maybe we'll get into that this summer, but he absolutely deserves to be up there, as he's better than some of the player. He's better than Jason Gardner, and give full respect to Jason Gardner. We're going to get to Jason Gardner in a second, but obviously Damon made that. And then after that, you had Reggie Geary in there, probably the best defensive player in school history. Then it really took off where you had Mike Bibby, who, in my opinion, is the best player I've ever seen at Arizona. I never saw Sean Elliott, so I can't say, but Mike Bibby was the best player that I've ever seen here. And he was the first uber mega national recruit, not merely a McDonald's All-American, but the second best player in this class behind a guy named Kobe Bryant. So, there's obviously that. And then Mike Bibby, he gave first team All-American, obviously helped lead Arizona to a national championship. Then after that, Jason Terry was waiting his turn. Jason Terry then was the National Player of the Year as a senior, had one of the best seasons in school history, probably the most selfless dude in U of A history as far as his on-court sacrifices. Most guys with that talent would not sit and wait for their turn. He said, I am going to wait for my turn, and Arizona was obviously much, much better for it. He was fantastic, and he was a monster, especially during that national title run when Michael Dickerson was struggling. Guess what? It was Jason Terry that was coming in off the bench, and it was Jason Terry that was the dude who was able to make those plays happen. He was absolutely a fantastic player for Arizona. Then it gave way to Jason Gardner. Now, I do believe that Jason Gardner is a little bit overrated historically, but still, you can't really argue. He was a second-team All-American. He came in here along with Jay Williams as the top 2 rated players in the class, and he was just a really good player here at the U of A. He was wildly erratic with his shooting, which drove me up a wall, but overall, a good player. That gave way to Mustafa Shakur, who wasn't good, but he was still considered the best point guard in his class, and the reason he chose that is because of Arizona and Point Guard U. The point is very simple, is that when you've got a lot of great point guards, it just makes point guard recruiting easier. And that's kind of what Lute Olson was known for. He was known for being that point guard, or being that guy that if you wanted to get to the NBA, you went to Arizona. He developed you. He got you into the NBA. And a lot of these guys weren't highly rated dudes. A lot of them weren't, the players who you're like, all right, well, it's just, outside of Mike Bibby, it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Certainly that Damon Stoudemire was going to be in the NBA, or that, that JT would be in the NBA and, make over $100 million. So you got to certainly keep that in mind. And now, so it made things easier. And that's still, when people think of Point Guard U, that's still kind of what they think of. Now, the last couple of years have been, obviously, I think, a little bit frustrating for Arizona fans at the point guard spot. Kerr Kriisa, the first couple of years here, listen, I'm pretty hard on Kerr, but Kerr was okay. Kerr was basically 10-4, but he wasn't really a good shooter. People would always talk about, Kerr Kriisa, he's this great shooter, this and that. He really wasn't. His percentages kind of sucked. And I guess my biggest problem with him, well, there were a couple. First of all, come NCAA tournament time, he was awful. Now, you could say, well, he was dealing with injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I get it, but at the end of the day, he was still terrible. And then, but that also didn't stop him from talking nonstop, which drove me up a wall. I have no problem if players are going to talk, but you better back it up. JT talked all game to opponents, but guess what? JT backed it up. He wasn't getting stupid technicals at the end of games when he was already 2 of 16 from the field. I've just never really seen anybody that he just talked so much and he never really backed it up. Defensively, he wasn't good. I was happy that Arizona moved on from him. But then you bring in Kylan Boswell, and it just kind of shows you, too, how volatile things can be, because Kylan Boswell, on paper, was supposed to be a top 15 player. We're going to talk about that, what happened with Lloyd, a little bit, go back into the past, and then look ahead to the future. But first, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, ladies and gentlemen, check it out. LinkedIn, all kinds of good stuff. All right, here's the deal. LinkedIn.com/lockedon. Post your job for free. Listen, everybody uses LinkedIn for a reason, and the reason they use it is because it works. Everybody likes LinkedIn, and the great thing about it is that you can hire people, you can find a job, and not only that, you can also find just maybe some jobs out there that you didn't even know were around. LinkedIn is that. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege is your one-stop shop. Go ahead, post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege. Another one where you will thank me later. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk a little bit about the Kylan Boswell experience. Now, Boswell kind of proves my point that Tommy Lloyd can recruit dudes, but not only can Tommy Lloyd recruit dudes, Tommy Lloyd can be the guy who, he can get who he wants. The problem is that he just wasn't that good. And honestly, a big part of it was that, I think he kind of got caught up, as we all know, we got kind of caught up in the the party life, all of that stuff. And again, sometimes a change of scenery is best. And I think that his college experience here kind of got away from him a little bit, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he turns out to be a very good player down the road. But it was time to move on from here, as I think the maturity issues were certainly lacking. Now, you could say that, well, he was young. I get all of that, but there was just a lot of stuff going on there. So that obviously did not work out. That was a disastrous past season for Arizona. But now I like Jaden Bradley a great deal. Jaden Bradley, obviously, anybody with eyes knows that Jaden Bradley was better than Kylan Boswell this past year. And he should have played a lot more than he did, because Jaden Bradley took things seriously. He trained hard, and he wanted to be the Arizona point guard. And you could tell that as he started to get more and more minutes, you started to see him get more and more comfortable. Defensively, he's an absolute menace. He's the player that can get hands on the ball. He can finish in traffic. He can shoot. I think he's going to be a better shooter, honestly, than people think. And that, and like I said, I think he's going to be an all-conference type dude. And when he's an all-conference type guy in the Big 12, I think he fits in very well with what the style of play is in that conference, everything that does come with it. Big fan of his. And like I said, I think a lot of people are like, well, man, he can't really shoot or this and that. I look at his form and I see a form that's okay. I also see a player too that throughout the season generally made big plays. Generally made big shots. I can think of a Michigan State game. I can think of, heck, look at that Clemson game. He was the one, he made a three down the stretch, and he was the one that was just getting into the lane nonstop and getting fouled. Arizona needs dudes like that. Arizona needs guys that are able to make theirs off the bounce, that are able to make difficult plays when it matters. And I think Jaden Bradley is that dude. Jaden Bradley, I think, is going to be a player that we look back at and we're like, whoa, okay, all right. He waited his turn, and then there's a little bit of Jason Terry to him in the way that he came off the bench. Now, listen, JT was better than Mike Bibby, but it is what it is. Jaden Bradley was clearly better than Kylan Boswell, but he waited his turn. I think he's going to be an all-conference defensive player. Not only do I think he's going to be an all-conference defensive player, I think he's going to be the player who is going to be the dude who, is kind of the heart and soul of the team. I expect Arizona to be much, much tougher this coming season. I don't think I'm really breaking any news there, but I expect Arizona to be much, much tougher. And I think with that comes a level that when games are close, that especially come NCAA tournament time, when you got guys that can make buckets, when you got guys that can get into the paint, when you got guys that can get into the lane and make plays, I think Arizona is going to be better equipped to be able to do that. And I think that's going to be a huge part of what Arizona does. Now with Jaden Bradley, I think from a statistical perspective, I think he's going to average something like 13 points, 4 assists, and I think he's going to be an all-conference defensive player, and I think he's going to be somebody that Arizona, like I said, is going to be able to rely on in big moments. Very excited about him. Now, listen, you got 2 years theoretically of him, but I'm guessing that it's probably going to be I'm guessing that it's going to be something like maybe 1, because I could see him going off to the NBA. We will get back to the future of that. But I just listen, there's no reason that at the very least you can't have solid point guard play at the U of A. And honestly, Sean Miller, it wasn't next level point guard play, but it was good. It was good enough generally. Listen, I like Mark Lyons. I think Mark Lyons is an underrated player in U of A, from the Sean Miller era. I know that he drove some people crazy, but when the game was on the line, he wanted the ball and he generally made shots. He generally made big shots. I give a lot of credit for that. With TJ McConnell was obviously really, really good here. My only issue with TJ is that he really couldn't score. Couldn't shoot a ton, but he was good. He was just kind of limited to a certain degree, but he was good. He was good for sure. You could win a lot with TJ McConnell types. Then Kadeem Allen was solid as well. Got a cup of coffee in the NBA, but then you had a lot of guys like Parker Jackson, Cartwright, Nico Mannion, just not probably good enough to be able to go far with in the NCAA tournament. And I think that kind of, that played itself out. So that was kind of where it is with that. But you should be able to get good players, and, to Miller's credit, he got a lot of highly rated guys. Some of them just turned out not to be very good or had other issues. Josiah Turner, for example, was one of the top 10 players in the country. Turns out he wasn't that good, and he had a lot of other issues in play as well. Kadeem Allen did a really good job with from the JUCO ranks. Parker was a highly rated kid. Nico Mannion was super highly rated. Nico Mannion just wasn't very good. It's kind of just the way it is. But he was able to get guys. So Tommy Lloyd, though, with this roster, I believe he should be able to get players. Now, I think you look at this roster and probably slightly concerned that Jaden Bradley is really the only ball handler on the team. Now, the coaching staff does believe that Caleb Love can be the backup point guard if need be. And KJ Lewis, I don't see the KJ Lewis part. I can see the Caleb Love part, and I love KJ Lewis. KJ Lewis, one of my favorite players. I don't know that I see him being the backup point guard, though. I haven't really seen anything to indicate that, but who knows? Maybe. But when it comes to Caleb Love, I can see it. Again, I don't know that Caleb Love's ever an NBA player, but if he's got to man the backup point guard position for a little bit, then I'm totally cool with that. You need to get somebody else in here, though. I think that this next recruiting class is going to be huge, whether that's in the portal or whether that's bringing in another player. You got to get that succession lined up. And I think Tommy Lloyd's going to do that. Again, here's one thing about Lloyd. I think, people look at him and they're like, oh, he's just this happy-go-lucky guy. When he has to make difficult decisions, he's made difficult decisions. And I got to give him a lot of credit on that. It is not the easiest thing in the world to be able to, find players that, want to come in for a year and then back up. I get all of that. But I think next year, you run the risk of losing Jaden Bradley to the NBA, because I do think he's an NBA talent. At what level, I don't know. And I know Conrad Martinez is on the team, but going into the Big 12 is a totally different animal. I don't know that I really feel comfortable with Conrad Martinez as my point guard or somebody that I'm counting on for major minutes. So that's something that's got to be addressed. But I've got a lot of faith in Lloyd. Listen, he's you can say, well, Kylan Boswell didn't pan out, but Kylan Boswell was still a player that's a top 15 guy. And Jaden Bradley was a year removed from being a McDonald's All-American. So there's he's certainly shown that he can get players. And now they got to obviously be good, but everybody liked these guys. Everybody thought they'd be good. You just got to be able to get dudes that can obviously play. I think that he's got that. I think that he's certainly got that in him. We will find out, though, because like we talked about earlier, I don't understand why a point guard would not want to play for Tommy Lloyd, because he's actually going to push the ball. It's not that it's not the fake Miller thing where you run the ball to half court and say we're playing fast-paced transition basketball, and then you just look at the coach for 5 seconds for a play. Lloyd's going to let you go. And Lloyd is also going to call you on it if you're not taking open shots. He wants you to take those open shots. He wants you to play with confidence. And maybe, that's something that he did with Boswell, and I disagree with it, but I think that he tried everything he could to keep Boswell's confidence. Boswell just wasn't good enough. But with the point guard spot, he should be able to get somebody, and he's certainly shown that he's got that recruiting footprint in Southern California now from from a variety of different places that we've talked about. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but first, Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go, ladies and gentlemen. Download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. All kinds of cool stuff at Monopoly Go. All right, yeah. With Monopoly Go, everybody has played Monopoly at some point. You've probably driven your family up a wall playing it. They've probably driven you up a wall playing it, but it is all fun and games because Monopoly Go is fun. You like it. It is a fun experience. And the thing about it, you can also bond with your family virtually. So again, check it out, Monopoly Go. There's another one of these ones. Going to thank me later on this. But download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. All kinds of fun stuff at Monopoly Go. And the great thing about it, too, is that you can play with your friends and you don't have to be in that same confined little room. So again, download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now. So Tommy Lloyd, though, where are you looking for that point guard? You're probably going to start looking at a place in California. And because again, that's really where he's kind of made his bones. And but again, it could be anywhere. It could be in the transfer portal as well. Lloyd has done a very good job in the transfer portal. Lloyd has been able to get the players that he's wanted in the transfer portal, and it's been impressive to watch. Trey Townsend was targeted very, very early on by this coaching staff, and they got Trey Townsend. Generally, the players that Tommy Lloyd goes after, he generally gets, and that's something that not a lot of coaches can say. A lot of coaches can't say that, yeah, we went after this guy and we were able to, we prioritized and we got him. Generally, if Tommy Lloyd goes after a player, he generally ends up getting it. And so that will be the case. Trey Townsend, perfect example. Tobe Awaka. Now, people at Tennessee did not want Tobe Awaka to leave. And when Tobe Awaka left, he had a lot of options, but Arizona was able to get it because Tommy Lloyd does a good job. Tommy Lloyd's still figuring things out from the recruiting angle, I think, but overall, he's done a very good job, and I got to give a big shout out to Jack Murphy as well for what he's been able to do with this recruiting staff or with this unit, but overall, very good stuff from them. So we'll find it out. But overall, though, Lloyd gets it. Maybe it drives people a little crazy about, during the regular season that he's kind of stubborn with his players. But overall, the fact is he still makes the corrections when he needs to make the corrections. Okay, now we're going to get back into some Arizona football tomorrow as well, and maybe even talk a little bit of Arizona baseball. This is going to be interesting because Chip Hale has obviously done a very nice job with Arizona baseball. Probably haven't given that enough kudos, but also Arizona football, though, going to start talking the O-line a little bit. Jonah Rodriguez, somebody from San Diego State that we have not probably talked enough about. I think that Arizona is hoping that he can come in and be the starter. And if he can come in and be the starter, then Arizona's in a lot better shape because you probably got 4 really solid players. But now I think you got to continue to be that. You got to continue to push that. But like I said, also with Arizona basketball, I would expect some good news from KJ Lewis, wink, wink, coming down the pipe. And we will obviously be talking about that a ton. Another year from KJ Lewis would be quite nice. No promises, but wink, wink on that. But should be a fun week ahead. All kinds of good stuff. But like I said, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Again, we're in the off season for Arizona football and basketball, but we are always in season here at Locked On Wildcats. So again, got a little bit of Jonah Rodriguez talk coming up this week and KJ Lewis. But on that note, appreciate you making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Bear down and back of the A.